The Monday afternoon session of the General Synod of the 2024 General Synod is now commencing. Welcome back. We're on, what is it called? What is that? This is the penultimate session of the General Synod. Go look it up. I love words, so I try and build people's vocabulary while I'm up here. And we will be opening with prayer from Katie Alley at microphone number 3. Welcome, Katie.
Let's pray together. Loving God, we give you thanks for the gifts of our time together, friendships created and friendships deepened, conversation born out of genuine curiosity and care, the delight of bats and owls, the beauty of cactus and mountains, meals that nourish and sustain us, and for your spirit that is with us in the midst of it all. For all that we are grateful for, O God, it is also true that we are growing tired and weary. Our bodies are tired from so much sitting. Our minds are tired from processing information and staying engaged. And our spirits are weary, for as grateful as we are for the good work that has been done, we know there is still work to do. We also know that when we are tired, we become more reactive and less curious. So help us be compassionate and gracious as we continue in our work this afternoon. Through Christ we pray. Amen.
Thank you, Katie. There is a discernment video that will start any minute.
Greeting, General Synod. My name is Paige Pugu, and I am a minister of Word and Sacrament, as well as a board-certified chaplain serving a hospital in northeastern Wisconsin. Blessings to you all as you spend this time working for the growth and health of our denomination, as well as the church as a whole. In times of discernment, I find comfort in the Psalms. So hear now Psalm 46, translated interlinearly. For the conductor, by the sons of Korah, on the Alamos, a song. God is a refuge and strength, a help in distress, very accessible. Therefore we shall not be afraid when transformed in the earth and at the collapse of the mountains in the heart of the seas. When raging and muddied are its waters, quake do mountains in his majesty, Selah. A river, its streams will gladden the city of God, the most sacred of the dwellings of the Most High. God is in its midst, it shall not totter. God will help it toward morning. In turmoil are nations, totter do kingdoms. He has raised his voice, dissolved is the earth. Hashem, master of legions, is with us. A stronghold for us is the God of Jacob. Selah. Go and see the works of Hashem, who has brought devastation in the land. He causes to cease wars to the end of the earth. The bow he will break and cut the spear. Chariots he will burn in fire. Desist and know that I am God. I shall be exalted among the nations. I shall be exalted upon the earth. Hashem, master of legions, is with us. A stronghold for us is the God of Jacob. Selah. This psalm reminds me that God is not just an observer, but a force in the world that does not sit idly by, but rather shows up with great power and commands us to stop and recognize God's presence and work in the world. This gives me peace, knowing that God is in control and that we are here as the hands and feet of God, not the architects and the masterminds. So in this place today, may we all be able to feel God's presence and work around us so that we can be God's hands and feet, listening to God's work and participating in God's glory.
At this time, I'd like to invite Patricia Seeley, the moderator from the Commission on Nominations, and the VP candidates to the platform, please. Please go to this end, come on up and have a seat.
Madam President, I have the honor and the privilege of introducing our VP candidates. Just needed to make sure they were all here. Israel Camacho. Israel is lead pastor of Iglesia Nueva Esperanza in Mesa, Arizona. In the past, he has served as both a church planter and a youth pastor, as well as on the Hispanic Council Executive Committee. He has served on the Commission on Nominations, the Pastoral Formation Oversight Board, the Women's Transformation and Leadership Guiding Coalition, the classes of the Southwest Leadership Team, and a member of the Classes Church Multiplication Team. He and his wife, Carla, are celebrating their 25th wedding anniversary this year. And they have 2 children and 2 grandchildren. Sarah Palsma. Sarah is co-pastor of New Hope Church in Powell, Ohio. She previously served as associate pastor of New Hope Church. Sarah has served on task forces for the General Synod, as well as on the Advisory Committee on Overtures and New Business at this General Synod. She has also served as moderator of the Commission on Christian Worship. She is currently serving as the chair of the Ministerial Formation and Care Committee for Rochester classes. She is the daughter of recently retired ministers in the RCA, Nolan and Phyllis Palsma, and is affectionately known as Auntie Sarah to both blood family and found family. And Grace Rim. Grace is the co-pastor of the Lamb of God Reformed Ministries in Nanuet, New York. She currently serves as classes clerk for the classes of Rockland, Westchester, as well as the second vice president of the executive committee of the Regional Synod of New York. She has also served on the Human Support Committee for 12 years and has served as the co-chair of that committee. Madam President, these are the vice president candidates.
Thank you very much. Will they be giving speeches at this point?
Yes, I am going to introduce them. Sarah Palsma, Israel Camacho, and Grace Rim.
Good afternoon, everyone. I am Sarah Palsma, and I am humbled and honored to be nominated as VP alongside my fellow siblings in Christ. I am a child of God who has been born, baptized, raised, ordained in this denomination. And I continue to serve as a minister in this denomination because I deeply love and appreciate this beautifully growing, diverse church. Allow me to share a little bit of my pastoral heart with all of you. As I've been processing the current state of the denomination and listening to the wonderful stories of God at work in our various contexts, I find myself grateful for the words of our ecumenical brother last night, who reminded us that good administration is good pastoral care. As we move forward in our restructuring process, the RCA of today has been called to enact good administration with good pastoral care. I believe we are called to lovingly engage in this challenging work in order to better equip one another to care for God's people and live into the calling to which God has already called the RCA, to enact Christ's love so that all the world, every tribe, every language, every nation may confess Jesus Christ as Lord. This is exciting and life-giving work, even though at times it may seem wearisome, slow, and frustrating. So from one weary, limping delegate who has been greatly encouraged by the worship, learning, and deliberations of this General Synod, as we now take this work back to our classes and go back to serving Christ in our various contexts, I encourage you with these words from Galatians chapter 6, verse 9. Let us not become weary in doing good, for at the proper time we will reap a harvest if we do not give up. If we do not give up. I believe God has an exciting future of hope planned for us, and whether or not I'm elected as your VP, I look forward to participating in this work with you. Thank you.
I'm honored and humble to be here, to be able to receive support from my brothers and sisters. 14 years ago, me and my family were praying for guidance that God will guide us to find, to continue serving His church. At that time, through the relationships we have with pastors, Reformed pastors, especially Pastor Richard Caballero in Phoenix, that's how after meetings together, answers to our prayers were answered. By the grace of God, we joined into what I call now my family, the Reformed Church in America. From day one, we could see how God used His people within this family to support me and my family, to find a place where we can serve alongside brothers and sisters in Christ, pastors, and the staff of this denomination. And we saw how we can have relationship of mutual support and accountability. Every step we have been able to take with the help of God and the people within this family, we have always felt welcome and loved. From the beginning, we have felt the desire to serve in different ways, as you have heard in my presentation about committees and the places that God has given us the privilege to serve. Every experience we had in serving with different sisters and brothers that do not look like me, talk like me, or think like me has enriched my life by seeing the great value there is in diversity and how God unites us with the same purpose. By the grace of God, I have been able to attend 7 General Synods, and God has been working in our church. Today I can see a new day, and a new day is coming for the Reformed Church in America, where day by day God's church looks more and more like the Church of Revelation 7:9. And this means that we as a family in each of the ministries that we represent can see each person in the same way God sees us, with love, feeling compassion for those who still do not know about God. To be able to share the love of Christ through testimony, thinking, acting, and living like Jesus. If it's God's will that I be able to serve in this capacity for God's church, I will do so with the desire to always listen, with the commitment and grace of God, knowing that every one of us represent real families in our local ministries and in our communities that so much need a church that impact with love and represent Christ in this world. Thank you.
Can you see me? I know I'm not very tall. God made me a little smaller than all of you, but that's okay with me. For God's grace is sufficient in our weakness. His grace is sufficient for all of us in our weakness. I was compelled to share this word of God with you today and share a little bit about myself, which I normally do not do, an introvert. Psalm 61, verses 1 through 2. The Spirit of the Lord, God is upon me, because the Lord has anointed me to bring good news to the poor. He has sent me to bind up the brokenhearted, to proclaim liberty to the captives, and the opening of the prison to those who are bound, to proclaim the year of the Lord's favor at the end of the vengeance of our God, to comfort all who mourn. And in Joel, chapter 2, 28, 29, 32, you know so well in Acts chapter 2. And it shall come to pass afterward that I will pour out my Spirit on all flesh. Your sons and your daughters shall prophesy, your old men and shall dream dreams, and your young men shall see visions, and young women and older women as well. Even on the male and female servants in those days I will pour out my Spirit, and it shall come to pass that everyone who calls on the name of the Lord shall be saved. Life experiences in my life has taught me to listen to others, and to listen to what God has, to listen to his heedings, his whispers through his Spirit. And if, Lord willing, I'm willing to serve by President Joshua Scheid, to serve in this kingdom, serve you all in General Synod, throughout all our regional synods and classes and congregations, so that as we shared today with many, many amendments that we have shared today, is to spread God's grace and forgiveness across every tribe, tongue, nation, of every gender, race, ethnicity, color, and I would add socioeconomic class, ability in all walks of life, the life of the denomination among our classes, regional synods, and now we'll call soon middle assemblies. And to be a church, to be a family, to be one body of Jesus Christ. And may the Lord, the Holy Spirit guide you to vote who is best for God's kingdom and to serve you and your churches and your congregations and this General Synod. God bless you. It was an honor to be here. Thank you for nominating me for such a small little person as me. Thank you, and God bless you all.
Thank you, Patricia. Family of God, you'll have the opportunity to pray this afternoon, to process and talk in the ways you'd like to as you continue to discern who will be the next Vice President of the General Synod. We will have voting tonight. I would like to invite Brian Engel, General Synod Council member, to come up to the platform to present the GSC financial report. The finance report can be found starting on page 50 of the General Synod workbook or at rca.org/workbook by clicking on the finance link. And Brian has somebody new with him, so I'll let Brian go ahead and introduce him to us.
Are we good? Thank you, Madam President. Thank you. Thank you, Tony. My name is Brian Engel, and I serve as a member of GSC and a representative on the denomination's Audit and Risk Management Committee. Slide 1. Is it there? There it is. It's my privilege to give you the RCA's financial report on behalf of the GSC. And my report will focus on 3 areas, as you can see: the fiscal year ending in 2023, the summary of GSC's fiscal budget, and the 2025 covenant shares proposal. Plant Moran Certified public accountants audited the 3 RCA corporations, the General Synod Council, the Board of Benefit Services, and the Church Growth Fund. I'm very pleased to report that all 3 corporations received unmodified clean audit opinions on their respective 2023 financial statements. And I will highlight some of the 2023 GSC financial results with you that are noted in the workbook, I believe page 50. Information about the financial results of Bob's and the CGF are highlighted in their respective reports. Slide 2, which is there. And I'll say this, despite the challenging times in economics and across the denomination, the GSC is in a relatively healthy financial position. The funding for GSC or General Synod activities, including the operational budget and other designated funds, was derived from a variety of sources. For the fiscal year ending September 30th, 2023, the GSC reported a total income of $15.5 million, with expenses amounting to $14.4 million, resulting in a net income of $1.1 million. This income was mainly attributed to the rise in investment value of nearly $3 million, marking a significant increase of around $6.6 million compared to the previous year. While donations from churches, individuals, and foundations funded 55% of the GSC expenses, overall contributions and grants saw a decrease of $560,000 compared to 2022. Assessments, which were consistently paid by classes, amounted to 26% of GSC's funding. However, the GSC also experienced a decline of approximately $1.8 million in assessment revenue compared to the fiscal year 2022. And this is mainly due to churches leaving the denomination, but as pointed out one of the first days by the General Secretary, the flow of churches out of the denomination has slowed considerably. In addition, other income saw a notable increase of approximately $6.9 million. And as noted, this increase is primarily driven by an appreciation in the market value of our investments. A majority of this income was earned in the endowment fund and is therefore restricted in how it can be used. The endowment fund grew by 9.8% in fiscal year 2023. And the fixed income portfolio also saw increased returns due to the rising interest rates. GSC's total expenses amounted to $14.4 million, a decrease from the previous year of about $850,000. And much of this decrease can be attributed to holding one General Synod in 2023 versus 2 in 2022. Now let us look to the 2024 budget. The GSC's main ministry priorities align with its ends policies, transformed and transforming initiatives, global mission, church multiplication, and a multicultural and multiracial future freed from racism. The Center for Church Multiplication and Ministry does much of this work, focusing on equipping churches and leaders to fulfill their calling, while Global Mission works to share the love and gospel of Christ around the world. The GSC's operating budget is mainly funded by covenant shares, contributions, and reserves. The operating budget includes all GSC ministry expenses, work for the General Synod and ministry support services. This includes global mission administration and missionary work, as well as the operations of MFCA. Bob's and the CGF operate with their own separate budgets. Covenant shares, as we know, replaced the per-member assessments in January of 2024, with a percentage set at 2.7% for the year. And the budget anticipated a decrease in assessment revenue by $600,000, while contributions on the on-mission fund remained steady. So there's that. And here's our expenses. Expenses are budgeted at $10.5 million. Personnel costs, including salaries and benefits, make up about 71% of the budget. And you can see how all the expenses are allocated by the area, given the chart on the screen. The 2024 budget was prepared assuming a draw on reserves of $1.1 million, of which $105,000 is for MFCA. So there's the 2024 budget. Now the 2.7% covenant shares recap. This new approach was implemented for assessing classes using covenant shares as approved by the June 2023 General Synod. And this method set a covenant share percentage of 2.7% of line 21 on the CRF, with 10% limits for increase and decreases per each church. And this funding supports the GSC, theological education, and established a fund for future General Synod initiatives. There's that. To move forward, the covenant share cap recommended by the restructure team, we're trying to reduce that covenant share amount, and we're proposing a 2.5% for 2025. The GSC will calculate each classee's amount based on contributions reported again on line 21 of the CRF, multiplied by the approved percentage rate. And again, changes to a church's covenant shares will be limited to 10%, either plus or minus from the previous year. In January of 2024, the General Secretary, working closely with the strategic leadership team, initiated the creation of a 3-year plan aimed at restoring us to having a balanced budget. And at the conclusion of this General Synod, the staff will finalize the 2025 budget, incorporating the improved covenant shares percentage rate and the estimated 2025 revenue. Anticipating a reduced revenue due to planned decreases in covenant shares percentage, the budget will prioritize initiatives that are aligned with our ends policies. Preliminary calculations suggest a 2.5% covenant shares rate will yield around $3 million in assessment revenue, a decrease of $100,000 or 3.2%. Slide 7. The GSC is facing a budget shortfall of wish it was $931, right? Right? No, $931,000, right? Excluding global mission and MFCA for 2024. This excludes global mission and MFCA. And as mentioned previously, the General Secretary has formulated a plan to achieve a balanced budget by 2027, while also striving to consistently decrease the covenant shares rate towards the ultimate goal of 2% or less, as proposed by the restructuring team. While the Pastoral Formation Oversight Board, PFOB, has proposed a General Synod assessment of $415,000 for theological education, with $15,000 allocated for PFOB meetings, General Synod professors, and collaborative efforts, and the remaining amount divided equally among the 3 theological entities, the General Secretary's plan anticipates a 50% reduction in the theological education assessment, which is about $207,500 for 2025. This plan also includes reducing operating costs and the budget deficit by around $650,000 for 2025. While there are no further reductions planned for the theological education assessment beyond 2025, there will be ongoing cuts to expenses. Under the General Secretary's plan, the $3 million in covenant share revenue would be distributed as follows. $30,000 reserved for General Synod initiatives, with this fund carrying forward annually unless the General Synod decision directs otherwise. Any funding needs exceeding this amount would require a separate vote for an additional assessment. $207,500 for theological education and $2.7 million for the GSC. The estimated assessment of the $2.7 million is projected to cover about 57% of the 2025 budgeted operating revenue for the GSC, excluding Global Mission and MFCA, down from 60% for 2024. The remaining budgeted operating revenues for GSC comes from contributions, grants, investment income, endowment distributions, and service fees. The 2025 budget will include funding for ministry priorities aligned with GSC's objectives and support the General Synod's activities such as the annual meeting, GSC meetings, commissions, racial and ethnic councils, as well as general administrative services. Over the past 5 years, assessment revenue has notably decreased due to churches leaving. In 2020, the GSC received $6 million in assessment revenue, and in anticipating this decline, GSC staff have already implemented budget cuts and a plan to make further adjustments to achieve a balanced budget, which may involve reductions for both personnel and non-personnel expenses. Any deviation from the General Secretary's plan, including a decision not to reduce the theological education assessments to $207,000, could lead to additional personnel cuts. The GSC, along with the General Secretary and staff, acknowledge the responsibility and privilege of managing funds entrusted by donors and congregations, and we are committed to prudent stewardship of these resources. Madam President, I present to you GSC's Covenant Chair's recommendation.
Thank you. General Synod F 24-1 is before you on the screen. Are there any comments from the floor? Please approach a microphone. And I see someone at microphone number 2.
Renee House, delegate from the Classis of Mid-Hudson, and also standing here out of my 26 years on the faculty at New Brunswick Theological Seminary, my time as a General Synod professor, and also working with MFCA, I would like to propose an amendment.
Would you read it for us, please?
To approve a General Synod 2025 covenant shares rate of 2.5%, of which 10% would be provided to theological education and $30,000 would be reserved for future General Synod special initiatives.
Ladies and gentlemen, there's an amendment. Is there a second? Thank you. And would you like to give a comment?
Yes,
Microphone number 2?
Yes. First, as you've just heard, this is a 50% cut in the income in a single year, which is a precipitous decline for these our theological education agencies to absorb. Second, the Protestant Reformation, undoubtedly a movement of the Holy Spirit, was also a mass educational movement with the goal of providing the church with not only educated ministers, but also theologically educated deacons, elders, and members who would be articulate, engaged, passionate disciples of Christ. To be reformed is to value theological education. Third, our seminaries and the MFCA are doing amazing work preparing RCA candidates for a wide variety of ministries in the church through accessible, high-quality degree and certificate programs and care-filled oversight. Our seminaries offer scholarships and discounts for RCA students and other theological education for the wider RCA and ministers transferring from other denominations. To be reformed is to value theological education. Fourth, the restructuring team's recommendation, RF 24-5, directed PFOB with the Commissions on Church Order and Theology to clarify processes for the ordination of candidates for ministry and the reception of ministers from other denominations to ensure equity, justice, and educational equivalency. We, this General Synod, amended the team's recommendation to also ensure that the theology of candidates and ministers received from other denominations aligns with Reformed theology. Our seminaries, the MFCA and PFOB, are the RCA's agents to provide and oversee Reformed theological.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Are there any other comments or questions? Please approach the mic at this time. Microphone number 4.
Gene Ryan, Regional Synod of the Mid-Atlantic. I would speak in favor of this amendment also because the funding of theological education, in addition to everything that has just been said, also seeks to preserve the great and vast witness of not just our Reformed tradition, but the tradition of the Church Universal, so it is passed down continuously, not just our seminaries, but theological education across the board in this denomination has always been a value of the RCA, and it should reflect that when we consider our finances as well. Thank you.
Microphone number 2, or excuse me, 3.
Stephen Schaffer, Classes of Ontario. I just want us to clarify, since we've moved from a number of 207,500 to 10%, I believe I did the math, and that's 300,000. So just that we know where we're moving from to where we're moving to as far as what the increase actually is. So,
thank you. Microphone number 4.
James Brum, Commission on Theology. I would also point out that pesky little biblical thing that 10% is a tithe, that we're saying we want to tithe what we bring in to move forward as a church together to educate others and to increase our strength. I know that it's been already said that increasing the theological education assessment could result in more staff cuts. Decreasing the theological education assessment will also result in staff cuts, just not here. It will be at Western New Brunswick and MFCA.
Thank you. Microphone number 2.
Hello, Dan Byer, Minister Delegate from Great Lakes City Classes. I would speak against this amendment. And one of the hardships that we are dealing with is that when you start moving money, you create this ripple effect that we've talked about. We had a time where we changed things and then we had to vote it all down after we amended and then didn't do the amendment. This is another instance where we create domino effect that goes through and we make what are already hard choices that much harder. I'm thankful for all of those institutions, and I'm also thankful that they have funding resources beyond the denomination that support their institutions. And so I believe that as we have lost 50% of our income, this is an appropriate cut, and we shouldn't create a domino effect that affects everything else.
Thank you. Microphone number 2.
Lisa Van Lonkhuizen, corresponding delegate from Western Theological Seminary. I have a question, and it is because I spent 9-ish years at seminary but did not know how their budget worked. As a student, I would hope I wouldn't. This money that is being set aside for theological education, how is it spent within the seminaries? Does it go towards scholarships? Does it go towards staffing? Does it go towards all of the above? Thank you.
Thank you. Would you like to answer that, please?
I believe we are giving that money to the seminary, so it's up to the seminary's discretion on how they spend that money. So if there's somebody that's out there that would be better fit to answer how that money is spent from those seminaries, that would be great. I would not like to speak on behalf of those seminaries.
Thank you. Microphone number 4.
Madam President, Felix Diunugraha, corresponding delegate from Western Theological Seminary. I spent the last few days in the eye shot of that camera, so I just figured I better take advantage of this moment to come to the mic. For Western Theological Seminary, it is part of our general revenue, and for us what we've decided is to use it to fund scholarship for RCA students and members. So for us, if you come from an RCA church, whether or not you are pursuing an MDiv or any kind of master's degrees, regardless of whether or not you are pursuing a calling to ordained ministry, if you indicate in your application form that you come from an RCA congregation, you automatically receive a 25% scholarship. And we use the funding from assessment to fund those scholarships.
That's exactly what I was going to say.
And microphone number 4.
Michael McCreary, President, New Brunswick Theological Seminary. We also discount and scholarship every RCA student. We also have a Reformed Church Center that we actually fund and do that as well. I serve on commissions. Many of my staff serve on commissions, and even though some of that money comes back, that's a time I give to them. And so we consider this being, not I, but I. And that's considered a part of this as well. My being on the General Synod professorate and other things as well. So we do a number of things around that. It also works into many, many other things, but yeah.
Thank you. Are there any more comments on the amendment? Microphone number 1.
Beth Carroll, City Classes. And I have a follow-up question to that, if I might ask. My question then is, are we then to, I don't want to assume anything, so if that money is reduced from your general budget, does that mean that, especially in the case of Western, that money would be taken from the money that you currently use for scholarships, or is your thought process to find other sources for the lost money towards scholarships?
Microphone number 4.
Felix Diunugraha, corresponding delegate, Western Theological Seminary. Madam President, while it would certainly create a hardship for our budget because our fiscal year ends on June 30 and the next fiscal year's budget has been approved by our Board of Trustees, our commitment would be to continue to fund all RCA students who are at Western Theological Seminary as part of our effort to live into our relationship with the Reformed Church in America.
Thank you.
Thank you. Microphone number 4.
Michael McCreary, President, New Brunswick Theological Seminary, corresponding delegate from there, and delegate from the General Synod professorate. We make more money in renting our facility than we do from what the denomination gives. And the amount of giving that we give is just painful when I think about it, I'll be honest. And so for me, we're not going to cut anything that we're doing. We'll continue to do it. We'll figure out another way to raise the funds. But as those who sit on our board know, we're already using reserves and figuring out ways that we will have to not fill positions in the near future in order to balance our budget as well. And so this just adds another $100,000 loss.
Thank you. Microphone number 3.
Madam President, Chandra Fairfield. I'm a Eldrick delegate from the Muskegon Classes and a recent graduate of Western Theological Seminary, actually just this past April. And first, I just want to say that no matter which way this vote goes, I want to just express my gratitude to this assembly, to this denomination, for providing funds for students. That the education would be so much harder. It would be so much harder to obtain financially if these funds weren't available to us. So I just wanted to take a moment and express my gratitude. Thank you.
Thank you. Microphone number 4.
Corinne Ellis, Classes of the Southwest. Earlier in this synod, we voted down the cap on the I'm sorry, I need to call them assessments, covenant shares, thank you. Haven't gotten the new logo, jargon yet. Anyway, the covenant shares. And I'm wondering if this isn't maybe one of the reasons. Because we have to learn how to live into this new reality. And so maybe the tithe, which, by the way, I really like the biblical reference in there. I think that's really awesome. Maybe this is a way of easing ourselves into it, and not having that cap might allow us to be able to do that with flexibility. So I guess that's my support for it. If the answer to my question is, as I hope it is, does the cap allow us to be able to, or the lack of a cap, allow us to be able to do this increase without messing up all the other things? So that is a question I would ask, Madam President.
Thank you. Are you able to answer that?
I will try.
Thank you.
What I'm hearing you say is if we don't have a cap on the covenant shares, will other things still need to be cut as we continue, as we lower this budget? Is that what you're asking? Yes. So basically, if this theological assessment continues to lower, other things will need to be cut from the budget. So if the covenant shares aren't capped, and we keep covenant shares at 2.5%, we don't anticipate theological assessment continuing to drop unless other revenue from churches lowers, then that's going to obviously bring our revenue down. Does that answer your question?
Not exactly. What I was saying is because this time we're actually raising what you, if we pass this amendment, we're raising what you had projected. Will it, because we took the cap off or didn't put in the cap, does that allow you to still not have to cut in other places?
We still need to be able to cut because we still have to have a balanced budget in the next 3 years. So there are other cuts that need to happen.
So if we vote for this, there'll be extra cuts?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Microphone number 2.
Carlos Rivera from Brooklyn Classes. I'm a little bit confused with all these numbers going back and forth. Who determines the finality? In other words, when is this budget passed? Is it passed now if we approve it?
Brian or?
The budget, yes, the answer is yes, but we've already been agreed to have a 3-year budget to balance the budget out in the next 3 years,
Okay,
so
yeah.
that has been passed.
Yeah, my other question is, if if there are no cuts made to the seminaries, and I'm a graduate from New Brunswick, so I kind of feel for them. So then, in what other areas will there be further cuts if we decide not to make any cuts to the seminaries?
To personnel, non-personnel, so staff positions, travel, potentially this event here is where the other covenant shares dollars go to.
Dum, 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 dum. Okay.
Thank you. Microphone number 4.
John Chan, Minister Delegate from the Classes of New York. I benefit from the student discount from New Brunswick Theological Seminary, but during those 6 years at nighttime I attended, the discount did not go up, and that was 10 years ago. So I hope this thing would pass so that the cost of living adjustment over the last 10 years has been quite a bit, that it would have more benefits for the students that are working full-time and working and go to school part-time, may be able to benefit a little bit more because that discount has not been changed for maybe 20 years. So I hope this thing will pass.
Thank you. Microphone number 3.
Hello, Abby Norton Levering, corresponding delegate, chair of the board of New Brunswick Seminary. I stand in favor of this amendment. To cut funding for theological education would be a move in the wrong direction, and I think that the amendment that was proposed is really just the bare minimum of what we need to be doing. From my perspective, we need to be creatively finding more ways to support the seminaries financially, and in particular, to support students pursuing theological education. From my perspective as a middle judicatory leader in upstate New York, our pastors and other theologically trained leaders are desperately underpaid, undervalued, and many of them are carrying big student loans. And we're still trying to find a way to have theologically educated pastors and leaders. We need to do better than this. We need to be thinking outside of this box. This is just the bare minimum of what we need to do in keeping our seminary strong. We need to be doing more. So thank you for listening. This is vitally important. I think, what is a denomination for? I mean, this is like this theological education is like one of the things that we really kind of have to do together. Let's not stop or shortchange this one thing that we really need to be focused on and that we really need to do together. Thank you.
Thank you. Microphone number 4.
Rick Fries, an elder delegate from the Classes of Ontario. A question that is kind of directed back to the seminaries. I've heard several times over the past 4 days that we've lost 45% of our membership that have gone to some other organization. Are these other organizations where previous RCA churches have gone not supporting the seminaries? Have we examined the method of trying to get some of that back from those organizations where they've gone?
Thank you. Microphone number 4.
Gene Ryan, Regional Synod Mid-Atlantic. A question for clarification in the consideration of funding theological education. Was there any consultation with the theological agents themselves in determining the amount that would be or not be given to them?
Thank you.
That is a great question, and I am not aware that there was consultation. If there's anybody at the back table that would be willing to provide a little bit more insight, that would be helpful. Or
I can answer a little. Friends, thank you for your conversation. These are the pains of leadership. You know, these are good conversations, and there are so many things that I love about what I do, you know, and there are so many things that I don't like, and this is one of those things. It is so hard to lose, 50% of the funding, and then we do a lot of great things. For theological education, I am a minister of Word and Sacrament in the Reformed Church in America because I received a nice scholarship from Western Theological Seminary. And I moved from Canada to Holland, Michigan because of that great support that I got from Western Theological Seminary. And I went through seminary 3 years, graduated, was ordained by the Classes of Ontario, and went to California to do ministry. So I understand, and I am a recipient of a really, nice gift from Western Theological Seminary to do my training. So I understand the importance of theological education, and this is so hard. So it is so hard for me just to sit down and say, okay, this is where we are. We need to have a balanced budget in 3 years, and there are so many different pieces that I have to bring. So that's why you're receiving this proposal. One thing that I could say, though, is that the rates right now that we're proposing in good faith, and knowing that the recommendation from the restructuring team was defeated, so in good faith, we're recommended at 2.5 covenant shares. So I think will be helpful, if this goes through, to increase from 2.5, bring it back to 2.7. That would be a great help for us to see that, because besides this amendment that we're discussing right now, yesterday also was approved that the commissions will need to meet in person, at least once in person. That is already approved. So we need to account that into the budget also to increase, that other piece that was approved yesterday. I hope this helps. And again, we are having good conversations, and I think this is good. And it's so hard, to decide because I need to go back and make some cuts because this is not going to fix all of the situation financially. I still need to make some other cuts, with the staff, and we'll have a meeting next week to talk about that.
Thank you. Microphone number 2.
Oh, I thought they were there first at 4, but I'll take it. Dan Byer, pastor delegate from the classes of Great Lakes City classes. All right. I think one of the things is that I appreciate that the presidents are here of the seminaries and the passion, and they should have that kind of passion for their work. And it is good and important work. And fiscal responsibility is good and important work. When I look at what we're using from our reserves, when I look at what we're doing here is we're taking limited information and trying to change a budget that is already being worked towards, and then we're creating other ripples and changes into that budget. I think one of the things is to trust those who have done the work to try to present the best possible budget as we move forward while honoring pushing ministry and resources down to the local level. When we start changing that here, not understanding the whole big picture, we end up creating a domino effect that doesn't help us. So while I appreciate the presidents of the seminaries and pray that God will help them to find the resources that they have, we are operating out of a deficit. We aren't in a balanced budget, and we continue to play with money in such a way that that's going to exacerbate the problem. So I would speak against this amendment.
Thank you. Microphone number 4.
Sarah Nielsen, delegate from Classis of Central Iowa, and I also was a candidate through the MFCA. I got my ordination through the MFCA, and so I just wanted to clarify for the room. We've had a good conversation about Western and New Brunswick, which are wonderful schools. They also have potentially other abilities to get funding elsewhere, but the MFCA's budget comes entirely through assessments. So this cut, they would not have the same paths to apply for other funding as perhaps the other schools would.
Thank you. Microphone number 4.
Chris Jacobson, Classis of Rochester. General Secretary mentioned another figure just now of 2.7%. I am curious about how the income would change for every tenth of a percentage point we would change the assessment upward. If we're concerned about having to cut staff versus theological education, how much money would we raise if we set the assessment a little bit higher?
It's a great question. To 2.5, let's say, to 2.5 to 2.6, you're looking at about $36,000. 2.6 to 2.7, roughly $30,000. So you're close to almost 70, $60,000 to $70,000 if we stay at the 2.7.
Okay, great, thank you.
Microphone number 3.
Brian Brooks, Commissioner on Judicial Business. A couple things. Number one, because of my voice, I've had people express concern. It's been like this for 12 years. I tell people, it doesn't hurt to talk, it just hurts to listen. The other thing is, I'm the director of a nonprofit, a little smaller than yours, only $4 million. It is tough to cut a budget for an agency that does good work. Where do you cut? What do you do? So my heart goes out to the General Secretary for making these tough decisions. And I think that we don't do the RCA a particular service when we meet as a synod and spitball different numbers out there to try to edit the budget. Because especially when the General Synod says something in a number, that becomes set in stone, and every other part of the budget has to be shifted to make room for that number. So I would just again urge that this body give the benefit of the doubt and good faith to the hard work that's been done behind the scenes by the General Secretary and the financial arm of our denomination. Thank you.
Thank you. Microphone number 4.
Marcy Ryan, Classes of New Brunswick. Microphone 4 is hot today. So, as a alumni of Western Theological Seminary, I so value my education. And so when I heard the question of, was this in consultation with Western Theological Seminary or New Brunswick, I did not hear a yes or a no. And so I am still curious about that. Thank you.
Tony or Brian, are you able to answer that? Or
Eddie, is this something that you could speak into?
No, we did not have a consultation with either Western Theological Seminary or New Brunswick. We just need the reality. We saw the reality of the cuts that we needed to make, and that's how, especially Lisa and I, when we were putting the budget together. Tony wasn't on staff yet. Tony began in April, so we did not. We did not have consultation with either Western or New Brunswick Seminary.
microphone number 4.
James Brum, Commission on Theology. Though I'm on Commission on Theology now, once upon a time I did church history, and in fact, somebody's still paying me to do RCA history, so I'm going to bring a little here. In 1810, the Reformed Church in America promised to fund the cost of theological professors so that we could have theological education. In 1990, the Reformed Church in America sent the first money from the theological education assessment to the seminaries and then T, I think. I think it was still T at that point. So the quick math is it took us 180 years to answer the promise. At the time, what we ended up funding was 2% of the cost of theological education.
Thank you. Microphone number 3.
Jonathan Algersmith, Pastoral Delegate, Zealand Classis. Speak in favor of the amendment. It's wise because it splits the difference from where we have been to where we are suggesting. And in that split of difference, recognizing that, as the General Secretary has just shared, Western, MICFA, and what's the other name of the seminary? New Brunswick. Sorry, Micah, my bad. If they've just finding out about it, there's a wisdom that exists in this amendment that splits that difference. And in that, we give the seminary the chance to, the seminaries and MICFA a chance to make those adjustments in this coming year. It also gives us a chance as a denomination to live into the covenant of care that we have lived across all areas. The final thing I would suggest is maybe we need to sell our old cars and buy older cars to help fund the denomination. Thank you.
Thank you. There's no clapping. Microphone number 3, please.
Sheila Moses from the Regional Synod of New York. I speak against the amendment for the simple reason that at the stage we are in our whole process, to just throw out a number like, 10% without thinking of all the other changes that we have made throughout this week, you're asking for the impossible. And obviously, you're asking that other things that we may have voted on to increase would be decreased simply because if this passes. So I speak against it because I don't think that you could just throw out a 10% decrease without affecting other items on the budget.
Thank you. Microphone number 4.
Jeff Minkus, Elder Delegate, Holland Classes. I didn't even know MFCA existed before this week, and so I've learned so much. But to clarify, that's not included in this, correct? If I'm reading this right and hearing, it is included. The document says the assessment of $2.8 million will provide an estimated 57% of the 2025 budgeted operating revenue to the GSC, excluding Global Mission and MFCA. And so MFCA then is included in the theological education portion. Thank you.
Microphone number 2.
Luke Baer, Classes of Wisconsin. Just a brief note. I'm not sure if I speak for or against the motion, but the fact that this is the amendment is at 10%, bear in mind as we're talking about the idea of ticking up covenant shares, because it's a percent, we would also be slightly raising the amount that would be going to the theological assessment too. So as for all of us trying to do that math in our heads, remember that number bumps up if we tried to bump up covenant shares.
Thank you. Are there any more comments on the amendment? Microphone number 1.
Bill Appley, Peckage, Minister Delegate, Mid-Hudson Classes. I, to be honest, don't know where I stand on the amendment. Where I stand is I'm not okay with the process. These institutions needed to be informed. A phone call takes minutes. It means listening to the grief, the pain that might be on the other end, but it is something we should do. And I think we owe it to those institutions. Not long ago, as chair of CPNF for our classes, we had grants go out from churches, and churches were counting on funds for projects, for ministries, and those grants were significantly reduced without our synod sending us a notice that those grants would be capped and lessened. So I don't know where I stand on this, but I do stand on the process being not good.
Thank you. Microphone number 2.
Chad Yeager, Chicago Classes. The last 30 minutes we've been talking, I've been on each side of this. I think I most appreciate the perspective from Pastor Elgersma from the Zeeland Classes. I think that the goal we've set of reducing covenant shares is important, and to see that jump back up to 2.7 would be a discouraging message to a lot of churches who consider this to be one of the major issues. I think if we were to study the churches that left in an exit interview, they would say assessments was either number 1 or 2 in the reasons why they left. This has to continue to come down. Having said that, I agree with the sentiment that we need to communicate better to the parties that are involved, so I like the process of agreeing to this 10% this year. My only concern related to 10% is I like the number 300,000. I don't like the number of 10% because I think it sets a precedent that someone might come in the future and say, we always give 10% to this or that. Somebody could say we tied 10% to Global Mission, or we tied 10% to another agency. So with that in mind, I'm in support of the amendment for this year, but I want to emphasize the importance of continuing to reduce covenant shares so that churches can be served. In our case, this will affect a half a staff position we would not be able to create over the next 2 years. So that has to be considered as we think about the local church impact.
Thank you. Microphone number 4.
Rick Friesen, Elder Delegate, Classes of Ontario. This is my first synod, but it appears to me that there are representatives from all the organizations at every synod. And the documentation I've reviewed indicates that we've known for 2 years or more that the assessments coming into the synod are going to be reduced, and now we have a number that's about 45%, I guess. So to think that anyone who is funded by this organization didn't recognize that there was going to be an impact to their individual commission or their individual school or university or whatever was probably a bit naive. And so I move against this amendment. It is unfortunate, but it's the reality. Many of us have been through business organizations that have had to dramatically restructure, and it's always painful. But it's done for the good of the organization overall. And I support the fact that, and the discussion about, we've given the leadership of the organization the direction and the means and the responsibility to put together a plan, and they've done that. And we're trying to micromanage it, and that's inappropriate. So I move against the motion.
Thank you. Seeing no one approach the mic, we will now vote on the amendment. Oh, excuse me. Thank you. Microphone number 4.
John Chan, Minister Delegate from the Classes of New York. I need to remind our brothers and sisters here that the other day we just talked about next generation, generational spark. I think we're talking about our future here. I know we have a lot of things in our mind. There's so many competing priorities, but this should be the top priority because the future lies on the future generations of our pastors. So I would like to ask our brothers and sisters to give this serious consideration to put our money where our mouth is.
Thank you. Seeing no one approaching the mic, we will now vote on the amendment. 1 is for yes, 2 is for no. We will vote in 3, 2, 1.
Of course I did.
The voting is now closed, and the amendment is defeated. Thank you for your good work. And we are back to the recommendation.
Madam President?
Yes.
If I was to speak, do I have to get off the stage?
No. Brian, you're here. You go for it.
Okay. I just want to let folks know, because based on the vote, who knows of classis askings? Raise your hand if you know what classis askings are. How come everybody should raise their hands? It's an additional amount that you can voluntarily send in for different amounts. And one of the things is theological education. So if you're feeling like we need to support our seminaries more, good. You know, the way our classes does it, it's like 50 cents a member, I believe. And it doesn't amount much. We could do much more. So there are opportunities for churches and classes to support our seminaries.
Thank you, Brian, for that addition. We will now vote on 24-1. Voting will begin in 3, 2, 1. The voting has ended, and this recommendation has passed.
Madam President, this concludes our report.
Thank you, Brian and Tony. I am going to take the presidential liberty at this time to skip over a time of table talk with question number 3, to let the back table know that. And at this time, I invite Janelle Lopez-Coolhouse, moderator of the Advisory Committee on Overtures and New Business, to the platform. The Advisory Committee's report can be found on rca.org/workbook under the Supplemental Reports heading. There is also one print copy on each delegate table. Janelle.
Thank you, Madam President.
Thank you.
And thank you to the Advisory Committee on Overtures and New Business in conversation and good work with the presenters of each of the overtures that we will now have a look at, and to those who supported us from Church Order and from the staff. This was a thoughtful and productive time of working together. I want to point out that because 3 of the overtures were nearly identical in nature, the committee has bundled overtures 1, 2, and 3 and will be responded to with a single recommendation from our committee. This adapted numbering is reflected in the numbers of our recommendations. And so if you're following along in the workbook, just pay attention to the fact that the numbers don't quite line up with the supplemental material that you've received from our committee. So I want you not to be confused about that. In response to the first, second, and third overtures, that include the classes of North Grand Rapids, Overture 2 from the classes of Schenectady, and Overture 3 from the classes of Schoharie, the Advisory Committee on Overtures and New Business recommends the following. ONB 24-1, to direct the Covenant Shares Review Committee to consider the concerns raised in these overtures as it continues the required 3-year review of the Covenant Shares model. Our reasons for this direction are as follows. The mechanism already exists for review of the new model through the review committee created by the General Synod in EC 19-10 in the minutes of General Synod 2019, pages 52 to 53. And a mechanism also already exists for classes to request assessment relief from the GSC on behalf of churches in cases of extreme hardship.
Thank you. General Synod ONB 24-1 is before you. Is there any discussion? Seeing no one approach the mic, we will now vote on ONB 24-1. We will vote in 3, 2, 1. The voting is now closed. And ONB 24-1 has passed. Thank you. Janelle?
Thank you. Regarding overture number 4 and a change to the BCO provision regarding Synod travel expenses, you'll find this one in workbook page 159. And please note again that the number of the overture is not identical to the number of the recommendation. In response to Overture 4 from the International Classes of Texas, the Advisory Committee on Overtures and New Business recommends the following. ONB 24-2, to direct the Commission on Church Order, in consultation with the General Synod Council, to propose amendments to the Book of Church Order that will permit the General Synod to pay the travel expenses for delegates outside the current limitations contained in BCO Chapter 1, Part 4, Article 3, Section 7, for report to the General Synod in 2025. Our reasons are as follows. The committee strongly encourages a posture of supporting delegates from outside the U.S. and Canada to enjoy the full privilege of attending General Synod for our mutual benefit. And currently, the Book of Church Order only makes reference to those travel expenses for those coming from U.S. and Canada. Secondly, there are complex financial and logistical considerations inherent in this proposal, which warrant further consideration in keeping with our global vision for the Reformed Church in America.
Thank you, Janelle. General Synod, ONB 24-2 is before you. Are there any comments from the floor? Seeing no one approach the mic, we will now vote on ONB 24-2. We will vote in 3, 2, 1. The voting is now closed. And ONB 24-2 is approved.
Thank you. You'll notice that Overture 5 was already handled earlier during the presentation of the restructuring team, so we will move forward to Overture 6. And in your supplemental materials, its number is ONB 24-4. The original Overture number 6 is found in workbook pages 159 to 161. In response to Overture 6 from the classes of Mid-Hudson, the Advisory Committee on Overtures and New Business recommends the following: ONB 24-4, to direct the General Synod Council to develop a policy for the denomination's collection and use of personal data, including gender data and honorifics, that could include an option not to disclose this information. And further, to study the linguistic implications of this policy in a multilingual denomination. Our reasons are as follows. The committee finds compelling pastoral reason to consider the needs reflected in the overture. As a denomination, we should strive to carry out our work in ways that does not cause harm. An option not to disclose gender information is important both for those who are questioning their identity as well as for those who do not feel safe sharing their identity. We also recognized that translating English communications into several other languages, and particularly traditionally gendered languages such as Spanish, has additional considerations for implied meaning. For everybody who thought to themselves, like me when they first read this, what exactly are honorifics? These refer to titles which name your status, such as Mr., Mrs., Sir, and Madam. I also want to finally say that our committee represented a really authentic cross-section of the Reformed Church in America, and we felt together that this could lead us in a unified way to responding pastorally.
Thank you, Janelle. Ladies and gentlemen, ONB 24-4 is before the General Synod at this time. Are there any comments? Microphone number 2.
Renee House, Classes of Mid-Hudson. Was there a conversation about by which date this would be done? Because if it isn't finished before the next CRFs,
that's a very good question. We did not.
Then the church will be in the same position, unable to report its data.
Thank you. Thank you. Seeing no one approach the mic, it's time to vote on ONB 24-4. We will vote in 3, 2, 1. The voting is closed. And ONB 24-4 passes. Thank you, Janelle.
Regarding Overture number 7, which can be found in workbook page 161, regarding mutually generous separation regulations that were adopted in RF 21-3. In response to Overture 7 from the Classis of Central Plains, the Advisory Committee on Overtures and New Business recommends the following in ONB 24-5 to deny Overture 7. The reasons that led us in this direction were that the committee believes that maintaining the consistency of timelines with restructuring and plans to move forward is in the best interest of the whole denomination. Secondly, we felt that because there are 2 years left to file a petition before the rules and regulations expire, that there is still an opportunity to review the possibility of an extension in the future.
Thank you, Janelle. Ladies and gentlemen, ONB 24-5 is before you. Is there any discussion from the floor? Microphone number 3.
Thank you, Madam President. John Garbison, delegate of Central Plains Classis. Siblings, as a member of this classis that sent this overture, I'd ask you to reject the denial. Again, we are seeking an extension of the regulations to provide mutually generous separation beyond 2026. We recognize that generous separation was an outside-the-box solution. It established a process that has minimized the contention in the midst of our painful losses. And the regulation included the 5-year sunset clause, though there was no reason for it being specifically 5 years. But as we've been reminded earlier this morning, meaningful change takes time, and we as a classis are asking for more time. We all hope that the losses are behind us, but I represent a classis that could still lose a significant number of churches as we approach the ending of the sunset clause. Again, we are asking for more time. We as a classis are actively participating in the restructuring process and will continue to do so. However, if the sunset clause is not extended, we will, in the near future, need to divert our focus and energy from restructuring to discerning our future in the RCA. And just to be clear, this request does not affect only 1 or 2 churches in our classis. As a classis, we highly value our local church relationships. And so we have made it clear that if one of our churches decides to discern whether they should leave the RCA, we would enter into that discernment as a whole classis. Personally, it's my hope that with the extended time, we as a classis will grow to accept and even embrace the theological diversity in our denomination. We are slow, some might say stubborn, but we love the RCA deeply. We're asking for more time.
Thank you. Microphone number 4.
Sorry, I need a little time. Brad Coates, Minister Delegate from the class of Rocky Mountains. Perhaps our classes misunderstood the generous separation, but we looked at it as a recommendation. You know, and the classes can be as generous as they want for really as long as they want. So I speak in favor of this recommendation.
And microphone number 4.
Scott Barton, Delaware Road and classes. I would speak against the recommendation to deny, and because I'd spoken to several people whose churches are kind of still wondering what they're going to be doing, and we've made a lot of changes this year that will not be going into effect till after 2006, and they're kind of waiting to see what's going to happen and how that's going to play out and how those effects are actually going to change the RCA. So we need to allow additional time to allow these changes to take place and allow those churches to see how is it going to affect them.
Thank you. Microphone number 3.
Jonathan Algersma, Zealand Classis, Pastoral Delegate. I speak against the recommendation. The Zealand Classis has been the epicenter of the development of the Alliance of the Reformed Church. 5 years ago, we were 24 churches. We are now 5. The anxiety that has existed within Zealand has been significant. By having a shorter time, that anxiety causes that anxiety stays in that sense of urgency. By living into what would be a longer period of time, that anxiety would continue to be low, which would give us a chance as a classis to continue to figure out how to restructure, what it will look like within the denomination, and will allow us to be wise and focused in on that and not a timetable that might be in front of us. And so I speak against the recommendation.
Thank you. Microphone number 3.
Thank you, Madam President. Philip DeCoster from the Commission on Church Order. I was one of the primary drafters of the regulations. And so I want to be sure that the body has context if you're new to this. These were developed as part of the Vision 2020 process that talked about mutually generous separation. However, there is a procedure in the book for releasing a church to another denomination And that procedure is largely within the discretion of the classes. So for churches in classes where they are in relationship and they get along well, a classis can work well with a church who is on the fence, who wants to consider, and the classis itself could adopt policies to reduce that anxiety rather than continuing the denomination-wide policy that was meant for a very specific thing at a very specific time.
Thank you. Microphone number 4.
Michael Amson, Delegate, Great Lake City Classis. I'm trembling right now of whether I wanted to say this or not. As a participant on the advisory committee to Overtures, in our conversation, this is for those that know Enneagram, I'm an 8. So I was asking some direct questions. I obviously experienced the anxiety everywhere. I've talked with many people. I remember I asked specifically for the restructuring team the question, what was the restructuring team's understanding of what the Vision 2020 report concluded on human sexuality? That was the question I asked. The response that I thought, that what I concluded from it confirmed, and what it was confirmed by them, which was, we are not going to let this be the make or break for us and move together forward in disagreement, and the restructuring proposal is a step through the door in that direction. And so what I gathered from that was, I don't know if some of our churches understand that that's what happened, like who are looking for an either or answer still and feel kind of anxiety and unsure about that. And I was very specific about clarifying that because that's the anxiety I've heard in my own congregation, which we even haven't had that conversation yet. I say that with all humility and trepidation, but I feel like it needed to be said. Thanks.
Thank you. Microphone number 1.
Hi, thank you, Madam President. My name is Tina Bonanno, and I am from Classes of Greater Palisades. I'm also on the advisory committee, and in our lengthy discussions over this particular proposal, this overture, one of the reasons that we felt that an extension at this time is not necessary, and again, at this time, was because there are still 2 years remaining. And that 2-year period is only for the churches to put in their application. It does not mean that the process must be completed during that 2-year period. So we felt that this, at this time, is generous for the time that is remaining, and at such time in the future, if closer to that deadline, if there is still a significant amount of consternation, that the topic could be broached.
Thank you.
Just as a clarification. Thank you.
Thank you. Microphone number 3.
Brian Keepers, Minister Delegate, ESU Classes. I was on the Vision 2020 team. Although I was not part of the sub-team that focused on this particular piece, I do recall that there was a sense of consensus among the team that even though we had to name a date for the sunset clause, that it was really about the spirit of what was being offered. And so I guess maybe this is even a question I got partially answered just a moment ago, but I guess I'm wondering, is there a reason that we wouldn't want to just extend this another 5 years if it's actually going to be helpful for lowering the temperature for, entire classes that's important to our synod, if that's what they need to continue to really engage and discern well. I'm just wondering, is there a reason why we wouldn't want to just go another 5 years? And even, Phil mentioned that it is up to the classes. But I don't think everybody's understanding that. And so I'm just curious, is there a reason why we wouldn't?
There was a lot of sympathy for that concern expressed within our group. The best consensus that we had was around the idea that this was the deadline or date that all congregations throughout the denomination had been working towards, and we wanted to have consistency.
Thank you. Yes, microphone number 3.
Madam President, can I come back like this?
Absolutely.
Okay. Brian Keepers, Minister Delegate of ESU Classes. Then I would speak against the recommendation or the overture because I do think that in the midst of change, I think I want to embrace that spirit of generosity, and I want to give these classes the time if it means that we can find a way forward together.
Thank you. Microphone number 4.
Michael Lamson, Delegate, Great Lakes City Classes. After listening to all sorts of things, and even after what I said, this is going to sound really strange. I'm going to speak against the recommendation, even though I was on the committee. For what Brian said, I appreciate. I think part of it also, part of my angst for what I said was of the lack of communication or the lack of clarity in the things I mentioned. I asked a lot of those types of questions because I know that anxiety is there, and I feel like those things aren't clear to some people, and there needs to be better communication across the board, which would make me inclined to say there wouldn't be harm in extending that clause further down the road. Thanks.
Thank you. Seeing no one else approach the mic at this time, we will now vote on ONB 24-5. Take that back. Microphone.
Stan Segrin, Classes of Orange. I speak in favor of the committee, so to deny the overture, with this reason, and maybe it's unspoken in some of you, maybe not. I hesitate to say it, but my concern is that the longer this goes, as classes and churches are debating, do we leave or not, they will be voting at General Synod for the future of the denomination. So they could vote for something and then leave. And I know there's no guarantee of that, and maybe I appreciate, brothers and sisters, if you're still debating leaving, and maybe you won't be here next year, I don't know. But I just have a concern about that, about if you're not going to be part of the denomination, you're ruling on policy of the denomination. So.
Thank you. Microphone number 3.
Jonathan Algersma, Pastoral Delegate, Zealand Classes. It's not about wanting time to think about leaving. It's wanting to take congregations along the journey of understanding what it means to be a part of the denomination and squelching the voices within those congregations that continue to cause this to be an urgency. The majority in most of our churches are in places where they're supportive and want us to be a part of the Reformed Church in America. But we have a number of different leaders who have voices that are listening from the surrounding churches that have left that cause us to continue to live into that urgency. The intent of asking us to deny this is so that we as churches can actually show within the classes why we stayed, the value, the vision, and the beauty of what it means to be a part of this, and not focused in on a timetable. Thank you.
Thank you. Microphone number 4.
John Byer, Pastor Delegate, Great Lakes City Classes. I think, maybe this is obvious to everyone, but one of the challenges with the timeline is that everything we approved has to go through all of the classes as it relates to all the decisions we made with the restructure team. And so that's a year from now that we find out whether or not everything that was approved by us gets through the classes and is approved again by the next synod. And so there's still a certain amount of limbo that we sit with as we wait for this process to continue to be walked out. Having said that, I'm not giving a position one way or the other, except for I just want us to keep that in mind. And I also want to say that as someone who's lost an awful lot of, like many of us, friends who have left, I just want to say I've been so encouraged by what I've experienced here. It has been beautiful, and so it's with excitement about what God is doing and how we're working together that I share what I share.
Thank you. Microphone number 4.
Marcy Ryan, Classes of New Brunswick. Once again, microphone 4 is hot. So over the last few days, we've been in so many meetings, and I've just been taking stock of what has been said. And something that keeps coming up over and over again, I'm noticing, is time and how we view time. And there are some decisions that are being made in terms of, okay, we need to pick up the pace, we need to go, we need to catch up. And then there are some conversations and decisions about we need to slow down. And so I'm actually speaking in favor of denying the overture, because I think it is a way to respect and honor what has been said in the past and what has been agreed upon, but also for the current moment, letting our yes be yes and our no be no. Thank you.
Thank you. Microphone number 1.
Brian Engel, Montgomery Classes Minister Delegate. I would vote against the committee's recommendation in that we passed the restructure, and we're in this goose frame, and it's going to take us 2 to 3 years to really form these middle assemblies and decide how, once a middle assembly is formed, transferring maybe between them. And I think extending the time debating the overture gives us a little bit more time to think that through and give us time to process it on the local level.
Thank you. Microphone number 4.
Gene Ryan, Regional Synod of the Mid-Atlantic. I speak in favor of denying the overture because, as it has been said a few times already, and I think would serve as a good reminder, is that this is not the last possible moment to extend this time. There has been time already. There will continue to be some more time, and while I respect the pastoral concerns of some of my colleagues and dear friends in our classes, there are also those of us who do want to live into this vision of moving forward together. And so I lament that any decision to leave this precious and beloved denomination, I would hope that we could come alongside together, but also recognize that this is not the final moment to extend this timeline, and therefore I believe we should vote in favor of denying this overture. Thank you.
Thank you. Microphone number 2.
Madam President, Chandra Fairfield, Muskegon Classes Elder Delegate, and I would like to call the question.
Thank you. Is there a second to calling the question? Thank you. And we will vote to call the question in 3, 2, 1. The voting is now closed, and calling the question has been supported. Thank you. We will commence with a vote on ONB 24-5, and we will vote in 3, 2, 1. The voting is now closed. ONB 24-5 has passed. Thank you.
Thank you. The final overture that our committee looked at is overture number 8 from the Regional Synod of Canada. You'll find this, I don't actually have the page number here. In your supplemental materials, it'll be the most recent
Excuse me, Janelle. I'm sorry to interrupt you.
Yes.
I'm getting a high sign that we highly need a coffee break.
I support coffee breaks.
Thank you, Janelle. We have a 20-minute coffee break at this time, and I will see you back here at 3:35. Thank you for your good work. Thank you. Come on back to our tables. We have had a nice break. We have had some nourishment. Sorry. We are starting our session with a video, and so I invite you to come on in, sit down so you can watch the video with us. Let's get that started. Thank you.
Greetings, General Synod 2024. My name is Kate Meyer. I am the Director of Counseling Services with Hospice of Holland. I am sitting among you this year as a chaplain representative and delegate from Holland Classis in Holland, Michigan. One of the verses that I primarily rely upon when engaging discernment is Proverbs 3, verses 5 and 6. And my most relied upon translation of those verses is from the New Living Translation, which reads like this: "Trust in the Lord with all your heart. Do not depend on your own understanding. Seek God's will in all you do, and God will show you which path to take." I need to remind myself, and this verse helps me do that, whenever I'm in a season of discernment, to try to sort out what is it that I'm looking for versus what the Spirit is nudging me to. Where are those things the same, and where do they part? And those places where they part, these verses help remind me to seek God's direction. God will let me go my own way, but seeking God's direction is a certain way to keep me on God's path.
We've been engaged in hard and good work. I'd like to invite Janelle back up to the platform, please. And I'd like to call on microphone number 3.
Brian Keepers, Minister Delegate, ESU Classis. Madam President, I would like to make a motion to reconsider the previous vote due to confusion that I heard among some candidates in terms of what we were voting yes on and what we were voting no on. I think the vote was too close. I think we want to make sure we get it right and make sure everybody is clear, because I do think this is going to have more significant impact than many of us realize in the room.
Thank you. Microphone number 3. You have heard the motion. Is there a second? Support. Thank you. And do we need to see that on the screen before we start? The screen very soon.
Do that. So let me make sure that that the delegates are sure on where we are right now. We have a motion to reconsider the previous vote that's on the floor. It's been moved and seconded, so now it belongs to the body. And it is debatable. And the question we are debating is whether to reconsider the vote. That is what we are at. So delegates should direct their comments to whether we reconsider. If the vote is to reconsider the previous vote, then we go back to the previous discussion on ONB 24-5. If the body votes not to reconsider, then the previous vote stands and we move on. Is that clear, everyone?
Thank you, Russ. We will be making comments on whether to reconsider. If you'd like to come to a mic number 1.
Yes, Corey Moss, Minister Delegate, Classes, Minnesota. Madam President, I'd speak in favor of this, yet I'd want to hear what was it that folks were confused on.
Thank you. Can we answer that from the table? No. Okay. Microphone number 2.
Ano Blau, Eliana Classes. I speak in favor of the motion simply in order to allow all the work of the restructuring team to be given by as many congregations and classes time to work out the implications of it. So I speak in favor of it.
Thank you. We are speaking to whether or not to reconsider the previous decision. Microphone number 4.
Madam President, Lyle Zumdahl, pastor delegate from Classes of Illinois. I've worked in the classes. I vote to reconsider this. As we've discussed it right after the vote before, there is confusion, or there is, I think, maybe a misunderstanding of, well, we've all decided this already. Everybody has processed it. But as I work with a lot of churches in other leadership, a lot of questions come out of, well, new pastors come in, new questions are asked. New people come on consistory, new voices are around the table. We need to look at this again. We need to look at it. It is always this churning anxiety about what's going to happen. And when the voice gets around the table that wasn't there before, say, we need to make a decision. I try to explain that, but they don't really get that. That anxiety is still there. And I think we can lower that anxiety, as some of the delegates before said, if we give them a little time and say, no, you don't have to. Even though I've explained it to them, that anxiety is still there. This motion would, to extend that, would show them that we want you to lower the anxiety. Let us do some reconstruction and let us move forward and see rather than hurry up and make a decision. Thank you.
Thank you. Microphone number 3.
Brian Keepers, Minister Delegate ESU Classes. The part of confusion was around in voting yes or no, some thought that they were voting yes to approve the overture. So that it was more of confusion around the vote, although I'm happy to reconsider the content of the vote, but it was the vote itself. And I don't know if maybe that could just be clarified if in fact we do.
Thank you. Microphone number 2.
Dan Byer, Great Lakes City Classes, ditto exactly what he said. We did not have an explanation in that format of what yes and no mean. And so just because of that, I think we should redo the vote just to get it right.
Thank you. Microphone, 4 is gone. Microphone number 3.
Philip DeCoster, Commission on Church Order. If my wife is watching on live stream, she should probably sit down first. I almost never change my mind about things. But I've heard things in the conversation that make me think maybe I should change my mind, and maybe some of you are that way. And so I speak in favor of the motion to reconsider. I don't vote, so I can't change my vote, but there were things that I heard in conversations here and in conversations that I had outside of the debate that I don't know whether I've changed my mind, but I am thinking about changing my mind, and so I think reconsidering is a good idea.
Thank you. Microphone number 1.
Cal Brower, corresponding delegate, GSC. I would speak in favor of this motion to revote. We've come so far and done such good work. Let's not let one minor little disagreement stop us from making sure we get this right.
Thank you. Microphone number 3.
Jonathan Algersmith, Zealand Classes. I have never been more thankful for an interrupted coffee break than I am right now. And I will only say this, please, please give us this time. Thank you.
Thank you. And microphone number 1.
Yeah, Hank Verlink, corresponding delegate with GSC, representative from the Canadian class of the Canadian Prairies. I speak in support to redo the vote, but from a point of order, I think we need to go then back to the calling of the question before we redo the re-enter the discussions. The question was called. Obviously, at that point, people had made up their mind that they knew how to vote.
Okay, thank you. Right now, we are speaking to the motion on the floor to reconsider the vote on ONB 24-5. Microphone number 1.
Anita Cyrilis, ESU classes. This is only my second General Synod, and I am among the people that are not that familiar with Robert's Rules of Order, and so I speak in favor of a revote. I just ask that when we do the revote, it is explained what we are voting on, because it's the backwards type of thing of a yes is no and a no is yes. So if that could be done, I would appreciate it.
Thank you. Microphone number 3.
Thank you, Madam President. My name is Eric Marino from California Classes, and I speak in favor of reconsidering this. One of my favorite attributes of God is that He's long-suffering. I have benefited from it, and I think we can also be a little generous for those who have a high anxiety level about this and kind of lower the temperature a bit, and that might just do that. And so one of those attributes I think we can also exercise as well. Thank you.
Thank you. Seeing no one else approach the mic at this time, we will vote for the motion on the screen, and voting will begin in 3, 2, 1. The voting has ended, and that motion has passed. Thank you. And that takes us back to consideration of recommendation ONB 24-5 to deny Overture 7, as you see on your screen.
Okay, so where we are now is we are back to voting on ONB 24-5, which is to deny the overture. So this is where your yes means no on the overture. Right. So if ONB 24-5 passes and the overture is denied, then there's nothing on the floor at that time, and another motion could be made. But right now, we are voting on the recommendation to deny 24-5, so your vote yes is to deny the overture. Just want to make that's clear to everyone. It's not.
Explain what the
Can I be back?
Okay. Ladies and gentlemen, Russ will continue to explain.
Apparently, I didn't say what I meant. So we are voting on ONB 24-5 to deny the overture. If you vote in the affirmative, it is the same as happened on the first vote. If you, and there's no extension of the deadline. Is that clear?
And could you tell the General Synod, please, what would happen if they vote no?
If they vote no, then we've got nothing on the floor. And a motion could be made from the floor. The overture doesn't come to the floor automatically. A motion needs to be made. Okay?
All right. Thank you, Mr. Parliamentarian.
That's why we pay him the big dollars.
Microphone number 3.
John Garberson, Central Plains Classes. Someone brought up a point of order that I wanted to respect because I agree. If we called the question before the previous vote, do we discuss again or do we merely vote?
My understanding is that we discuss again, that the body has determined that it wishes to reconsider the prior vote.
I just wanted us to be
So we
clear
get
on
into
that. I was fine either way, just...
Right.
Microphone number 4.
Ron Spence, Classes of California. I was at General Synod last year when our august General Secretary made a statement that gave us all room for hope and all room for our heart on the issue that underlies all these questions. And I believe had that statement been able to have been made, most of what we lost in Classes of California would have been delayed and they would have had time. Because I will tell you, if they could see how we're behaving now, how we're living now, how we're serving now, and how we're loving now, that I give Cameron a big hug every time I see them, they would not have taken this graceful separation. And so by giving this time, maybe that will prove to people that need to see more that we're willing to wait. Because we have a Heavenly Father who waits by the gate until we return and doesn't wait with a stick. He waits with a ring and a robe and a party.
Thank you. Microphone number 2.
Thank you, Madam President. Jeff Knoll, Minister Delegate from Delaware Raritan Classes, which is parts of New Jersey and Pennsylvania. Okay, I just wanted to put this in pastor language rather than in polity wonk language. No offense to Russell. The overture was to extend the deadline. The recommendation that we're voting on is to deny the overture. So our decision is a yes and no decision on the recommendation to deny the overture to extend the deadline. So if we vote yes, it is to deny the overture and not extend the deadline. If you vote yes, it is to deny the overture and not extend the deadline. If we vote no, then there's a Pandora's box of other things that might happen. But a yes means that you do not want to extend the deadline on the graceful separation. Thank you.
Thank you. Microphone number 1.
Hi, thank you, Madam President. This is Tina Vidano again from Classes of Greater Palisades. And as I mentioned, I was part of the advisory committee. And cannot be quite as eloquent as the other gentleman, but to put this in more layman terms, the reason that we voted the way we did and the recommendation that we made was, for example, would you consider right now in 2024 sending a request to the IRS to extend your 2026 tax deadline? Because that's what you're looking at, is you're looking at a time frame that is out in the future. There will be time after discernment, after our good works and our development of the restructuring, to take a second look at this and say, at that time is now, do we need this extension or do we not? Because things have progressed. And there will be time to vote on it at that point in time. Our discernment was that this was a bit premature. Thank you.
Thank you. And microphone number 4, please.
Mike Lamson, Delegate, Great Lakes City Classes. Is there a possibility to put Overture 7 on the screen? Is it possible to do that? I mean, I know people have laptops and such, but I don't know if everybody sees the actual overture itself. Is that possible?
It is not possible at this time.
It is not possible. Okay. Well, then I'll leave it up to you to look at it. My second is kind of extending, is more the parliamentary procedure, just to I make clear for me, I understand it. If we vote yes to deny the overture, discussion ends, we move on. If we vote no to say no to what our committee said, then nothing happens. And if they want to discuss the overture, and it's, again, someone has to make a motion from the floor here to put it back in the docket. Is that what I'm clear on with parliamentary procedure?
Yes.
Just so in case anyone didn't get that. Okay, thanks.
Thank you. And microphone number 3.
Brian Keepers, Minister Delegate, East Classes. Madam President, I wonder if it could be helpful to the Assembly to hear from our General Secretary on this, if he might be willing to just offer kind of his perspective in terms of, anything that could be helpful for us as we get clarity.
Thank you. Mr. General Secretary?
Thank you, Brian. The body today made a lot of decisions about the restructuring team report. From my perspective, this will help to extend the deadline will help us to lower the anxiety level, and I think that will be important for the work that I need to continue to make, the work that Joshua needs to continue to make as we serve churches in this season of change. So I don't know if this helps, Brian, this response to your question, but lowering the anxiety level, I think, will be really, really important as we continue to go in this journey of transformation in our denomination.
Thank you very much. Is there any more discussion from the floor? We will once again vote on ONB 24-5. Voting begins in 3, 2, 1. And the voting has ended. And it is denied. Thank you very much. Microphone number 3.
John Garberson, Central Plains Classes. There is a motion that should appear on the screen. Reading to extend the mutually generous separation regulation, RF 21-3, adopted at General Synod 2021 from its current deadline, June 1, 2026, to June 1, 2031.
Thank you. Is there support for that motion? Thank you.
Do I need to give reasons?
You may.
I may?
Please.
Okay. Process is slow and will continue much longer than the 2 years remaining in the sunset clause. Churches who want to be included in the mutually generous separation will need to divert their time and focus away from restructuring to allow for sufficient time to discern and decide on their future in the RCA before the 2026 deadline. Extending the regulations will lower the anxiety of congregations, allowing them to participate more wholeheartedly in the restructuring process. And again, while regulations are not the preferred way of conducting business at the General Synod, this proposal is not a new regulation. It simply extends an existing one.
Thank you. Is there any discussion on this motion? Microphone number 2. Excuse me, number 1.
Reverend Bill Appleyard Peckage, Mid-Hudson Classes. I speak against the motion. And I say this because we've heard a lot about the churches that might and might not leave. And for those of us who are committed to staying, you don't reduce our tension by this. You increase ours. So we have to make multiple paths forward, either one with you or one without you. And that doesn't help us. And so I ask that you find a separate way, talk to your classes about finding a methodology within the classes where you can leave grace-filled if you need to pass the deadline. But don't add to our tension as we seek to move forward. And I ask that pastorally. Thank you.
Thank you. Microphone number 4.
Corinne Ellis from the Classes of the Southwest. So I have a confession to make. I am a sinful being, and when I first read this request from the Central Plains, I didn't like it, and I said, we've already given them enough. We just need to cut this off, right? That was my initial reaction. It was not my grace-filled reaction. But I also remember when I went to a meeting in our get out now because they're going to close the window and you won't have a chance to go. And there was this sense of you got to do it now. And I remember that and thinking, no, they wouldn't do that to us. Perhaps this is our way of saying, we're not going to do that to you. Perhaps this is our way of saying, we're going to give you the time that you need to recognize what we know, that we are working together and embracing our differences and loving one another as a denomination who wants to change the world for Christ. And so I will admit, though, I'm still a little uncomfortable with the year 2031. That just seems so far away. And so I'm kind of thinking maybe a little bit earlier, shorter would be better, but not being from there, I don't know how long they need. So I guess I'm trying to get rid of my side of me that wants to just say, I'm done with you, and embrace the side that says, I love you, and if you need this, I want to give it to you. Thank you.
Thank you. Microphone number 1.
Steve Norman, Central California Classes. Question for clarification, something I was confused about with the earlier discussion, and actually even more confused now. Is gracious separation a recommendation or a regulation? I'm seeing both words. My understanding is it was a recommendation, but now I'm hearing regulation. So if we could have some clarification on that.
Thank you. Is there someone who could clarify that? Microphone number 3.
Perhaps with less earth-shattering things than I said it the last time I was at the microphone. The General Synod passed rules and regulations to interpret the part of the Book of Church Order which talks about a church leaving the denomination. Those rules and regulations are authorized by a certain provision in the Book of Church Order. So these contain the same force and effect. Like anything in the law, and these are effectively that, they are subject to some interpretation. So there are some recommendations that go along with that, but there are regulations that say, depending on votes and process and things, this is what the classes must do as part of this grace-filled separation process.
Okay, microphone number 4.
Gene Ryan, Regional Synod of the Mid-Atlantics. I offer an amendment to the motion to extend the date to replace the year 2031 to 2028. I wonder if this might be a better middle ground, because I also heard the conversations during our break, and I hear the hurt and the anxiety of my brother from Zealand Classis. And I also want to acknowledge the fact that there are those of us too who are ready to move on. So I wonder if this might be a middle ground for us to consider. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there a second to this amendment? Thank you very much. Any comments at this time will be directed toward the amendment, which is in green on your screen. Microphone number 1.
Ed Schmidt, pastoral delegate from Classis Southwest Michigan. I'm in favor of the amendment because adding another 5 years, as the original motion said, really puts even greater burden on what our staff already has to do. We're talking about the restructuring, we're talking about implementing, we're talking about budgets, we're talking about figuring out what the covenant shares were going to. We had this discussion today about what our covenant shares were going to be, and they will still be dealing with churches and what our presence or absence would be in the future, and it makes it even more difficult of projecting what it would be in 3 years or 2 years out. I love the shorter 28. It adds a few years to the original recommendation. The BCO also still allows people who want to leave the denomination in its own way as well. So there still are those avenues that people want to leave. We're just extending the deadline on this, and I would speak in favor and encouraging to add the 2 years, gives time for restructuring, but also, takes into consideration what the staff is going to have to do as they look for how many churches, what the covenant shares are going to be, what the budget's going to look like. We're still, 4 years down before we go into the 3-year General Synod stuff. So let's not make it more years than we need to.
Thank you. Microphone number 3.
Jonathan August, New Zealand Classis. I speak in favor of the amendment. It's kind. The reconsideration is an expression to those of us who have, it's kind. And in the midst of this is one of those places where we too, who are asking for this extension, also need to act in kindness and responding and saying, thank you for the consideration. And in that consideration, this is an appropriate piece. Our desire is not to create more anxiety for churches outside of this. Our desire is to take all of the people who are a part of our current congregations along with us to be participating in what God is doing and the beauty of what we anticipate God is going to continue to do in this denomination. It's not so much about us wanting to leave or thinking about leaving. It's about the people who are with us right now who are asking those questions, and this gives us an opportunity to lower their anxiety, give them the ability to see and to experience the wonder of what God is doing in this. So I speak in favor of the amendment, and I just say thank you to the General Synod for the way that you have engaged this. Thank you.
Thank you. Microphone number 2, are you speaking to the amendment? No. Microphone number 3, are you speaking to the amendment? No, they denied. Microphone number 3.
John Garbison, minister from Central Plains Classis. I speak in favor of this amendment. And what I wanted to name that hasn't been named yet is that we as a denomination and as a General Synod are in a process of building and rebuilding trust with each other. And I really appreciate my brother from Mid-Hudson, is that what it was? Expressing the reality of their anxiety, because I hadn't heard that before. And our intent is not simply to relieve our own anxiety, but to build trust. And so I'm in favor of this because I think it moves us towards trust.
Thank you. Seeing no one approaching the mic to speak to the amendment, we will vote now on the amendment that's seen in green on the screen. Voting will be in 3, 2, 1. The voting is now closed, and the amendment passes. Thank you. And I would like to call on microphone number 2, please.
Madam Secretary Anthony Davis from Classis of California. I would just like to once again ask if we can have the General Secretary give a point of clarification on how does this extension, or how would this extension benefit his work. I really got it lost once we started doing all the other bouncing back and forth. So please forgive Eddie, but I want to rehear what you said again, please.
General Secretary.
That's fine. Extending the time I think it will lower the anxiety. That's what I said before. So it's initially was 5 years, now it's extending 2 years, and we heard, from two ministers of classes that are still processing, saying that this is kind. So I think that'll be great to extend that grace, and I agree with John that he said that this helps in rebuilding, trust, and I agree with that.
Thank you. Microphone number 2.
Luke Bear, Classis of Wisconsin. I think one of the things I just wanted to point out, I think we all recognize it, is that no church is a monolith. Any of our churches are not of completely one mind on everything. And so as we consider this, I think for churches for whom this is a debate as all of these new things are unfolding, I think it's important for us to remember that if the church as a whole was already dissatisfied with the RCA, those churches already left. They're already gone. It's the churches where we have individuals within those churches that are not all of one mind. And I believe in the midst of all of this uncertainty, what this gives is the churches that are still here that are wrestling this out, individual by individual. It gives, like Eddie said, this lowers some of the anxiety so that the persuasion can continue, even as we all head into so much that's uncertain.
Thank you. Microphone number 4.
Thank you, Madam President. Cameron Van Coten, Lawhead, Commission on Christian Action. I rise neither in support or unsupport of this recommendation, but rather to offer, from the perspective of Christian action and pastoral care, I think it's important that the body recognizes that neither of the votes, whether to support or to deny this overture, is without consequence. We've heard a lot today about budgets, about anxiety over balancing that in the next couple of years, about so many aspects of this change in our denomination. We as a denomination will not be able to move forward wholly and healthily until the time frame is sunsetted, or whatever the words are in the overture. And I just want to name that. Should the body choose that trade-off, they are empowered to do so, but I want them to recognize that voting to extend is not also without significant consequence.
Thank you. Microphone number 1.
Yeah, Matt Draffin, Montgomery Classes Minister Delegate. And given the fact it seems like a nice consensus has already been reached, I call the question.
Okay, thank you. Is there a second on calling the question? We will be voting on calling the question at this time. Calling the question will move us to a vote. And we are voting in 3. Yes, microphone number 3.
Kent McCurry from Classes Connected. Point of order. When you call the question, my understanding is you're not allowed to give your opinion or talk or say words other than call the question.
You are correct, Kent.
Okay, and I thought I heard some more conversation before the delegate called the question.
Mr. Parliamentarian, would you like to speak to that?
That's true. So the delegate should follow that practice. If you're calling the question, you can't at least make a substantive argument directed to the issue so that you get the last word. You simply have to call the question.
Are we still going to accept the question being called? We are not going to accept the question being called at this time. Okay. And I see microphone number 2.
Thank you, Madam President. Dave Van Netten, Ministerial Delegate from Pleasant Prairie Classes, and I move to call the question.
Thank you. Is there a second? I'm hearing a second on that. And we will vote to call the question in 3, 2, 1. The voting is now closed, and that vote passes. Thank you very much. That moves us into a vote on the motion that is seen on the screen. We will vote in 3, 2, 1. The voting is now closed, and that motion passes. Thank you for your good work. Janelle, I turn it back over to you.
Thank you, Madam President. I turn the body's attention to Overture number 8, which is one of the only regional synod overture. It doesn't have a page number, but in your index on the website of the different sections, you will see regional synod overtures, and that's where it can be found. In your supplemental material distributed today, or in that section, you will find it as Overture 8 and ONB 24-6. Okay? In response to Overture 8 from the Regional Synod of Canada, the Advisory Committee on Overtures and New Business recommends the following. ONB 24-6. To encourage the Regional Synod of Canada to give voice to their needs as participants in the restructuring process, to see whether the restructured model and definition of the Middle Assembly could accomplish their goals, and at the same time, to encourage the RSC to begin exploring an outline of the structure and polity of their proposed new denomination as it relates to the RCA Book of Church Order, and further, to direct the General Synod President, the General Secretary, and their designees to engage in meaningful conversation with the Regional Synod of Canada and its classes and congregations as the RSC engages in the above processes, both to hear the needs of the Canadian churches and to encourage continued collaboration. The Advisory Committee on Overtures and New Business reasons are as follows. The original Overture, number 8, does not provide sufficient detail to know whether the proposed new denomination would be compatible with current RCA polity, such that the RCA could enter into the requested agreements with the proposed new denomination. Secondly, the examples given in the reasons for Overture number 8 regarding the change to affiliate status by the colleges and a seminary is not comparable precedent to a change of covenantal relationships between a denomination and one of its constituent assemblies. However, the committee feels hopeful that there could be an opportunity to remain in communion with the Regional Synod of Canada in the developing context of restructure and to learn from their experiences while offering the self-definition that Canadian churches desire. The committee further wants to underscore the value of having the Canadian churches as part of the whole body and wants to facilitate further conversation.
Thank you, Janelle. General Synod ONB 24-6 is before you. Microphone number 3.
Stephen Schaffer, Classes of Ontario. I speak in favor of this motion. I also want to say thank you to the Advisory Committee for listening well to what we were attempting to do, but there's some that we were able to share with you that about the heart behind this that might be beneficial for the body. Some of this was really difficult to write as part of the team drafting it because it's rooted in a very particular Canadian thing. I'm an American immigrant to Canada, and I've had to learn a bit about what that means. The nationhood and the process by which Canada became a nation is different than how America became a nation. It's called Confederation, and we're still part of the British Commonwealth. And so we are our own nation with our own flag, with our own charter, and yet at the same time we are still in relationship to the United Kingdom, which is different than how America is in relationship with the United Kingdom. I say it nicely that Americans threw tea in a harbor and had a revolution. Canadians asked politely to be a country. And so part of what we're looking for, and part of what was the heart behind this, is to say, can we change the relationship such that we can be a church on our own 2 feet as Canadians, and at the same time not break fellowship with the RCA? And so for me, as a delegate, speaking for myself, not necessarily for every Canadian individual or church, I don't believe this is a smokescreen for schism. That this was an attempt to try to redefine that relationship in such a way that the Canadian churches can have nationhood and self-definition without breaking that fellowship. And so that's, at least I want you to see the heart of what we were trying to do. And I appreciate that we feel like we were heard by the advisory committee, and hopefully at least the body can understand the heart behind this, whether they decide they want to do this and grant this or not. Thank you.
Thank you. Microphone number 2.
Thank you. I hope you realize what we did this earlier today. We're dealing with Canada right now, and you all had moose for dessert. So we're trying to get you on our side, and we appreciate that. I am speaking. I am John Captain, the Executive Secretary, Corresponding Delegate for the Regional Synod of Canada. And I've been working on this for over a year, dealing with various churches across Canada and seeing where they're at. And I almost feel, even though I appreciate the work of the advisory committee, especially with all the other things going on, I feel there's been some miscommunication perhaps. And I just want to talk about a number of things. So I'm speaking to deny the overture as it's presented by the advisory committee, hoping that somehow there can be a motion afterwards, similar as what we did here, which would allow us, that would be more in concert with what we originally said. And so the one thing I said, debate, is in the first paragraph, where it says that the Regional Synod give voice to their needs as participants in the restructuring process. It was over a year, actually back in 2022, that the Canada sent in a request to the restructuring team. And last September, in fact, the restructuring team actually sent us a letter. And in that letter, it basically said this: we would encourage you to consider the type of relationship that you would have. And we would welcome you as a partner in communion with the RCA. And what this letter was really saying, and I could read the whole thing, but I only have limited time, is that you're encouraging us to bring an overture to this General Synod, which we have now done. And so at that time, even though it wasn't defined as it is now and still isn't fully defined.
Thank you very much.
Excuse me, can I come back for my second amendment?
But not right now. I'm going over here to microphone number 3.
Yeah, Olga Schaffer. I'm a corresponding delegate for the Commission for Women. Sorry. I speak in favor of the recommendation. Madam President, I just want to thank the ONB Advisory Committee for this recommendation, and I feel personally that we were heard, and so I thank you.
Thank you. And microphone number 3.
Thank you, Madam President. Good day, I'm Al Platt. I am a minister delegate from the classes of the Canadian Prairies. I serve I'm very proud to serve as the president of the Regional Synod of Canada. I have a great love for our denomination. as the Reformed Church in America, I speak in favor of the recommendation from the advisory committee. What I like about it is it gives us reason to pause, try things, and see what our needs are rather than rush into something, which I really like about it. I do acknowledge, as many of you know, that for some of our churches, this doesn't move far enough, fast enough, and a lot of you know exactly what that means. And so I lament potential loss because of that. However, doing things poorly just to get them done fast isn't a good way forward. So I speak in favor of this recommendation. I urge the General Synod to vote that way. And Madam President, if you could send my thanks to Janelle Kohlhaas and her advisory committee for talking well with us, listening really well, and trying really hard to come up with something for us. I appreciate that very much. Thank you.
I will do that. Thank you very much. And microphone number 2.
Oh, 2. Sorry. Somehow I thought I got moved to 3. Don't start the clock yet.
Please start with
I'm going to have to speak fast now, okay?
Please start with your name and sending by.
Again, John Captain, Regional Synod of Canada, Corresponding Delegate, Executive Secretary. In the overture, it talks about that you would encourage us to begin exploring an outline of the structure and polity. We have done that. We have a broad outline, which we did present to the churches. Our board thought we don't have to get into more detail until we're actually at a point where we know that we're moving ahead with this. The next thing is, we spent 8 months getting feedback from our churches. I got a folder of all kinds of feedback with our proposals, our thoughts. We had meetings, discussions at classes meetings. This motion, or this overture, comes out of overtures that came from our 3 classes asking us to do this. I wonder why you have to go back to the churches. The second time we went back to churches, many of them said, we've already given you our thoughts and opinions. So I question that part of you having to go and visit all the churches and do all this when it's been done quite extensively. And the other part is, we're not asking at this stage for you to approve us to be a separate denomination. We're saying that you give us, to empower us to continue this process, and if down the road we decide, based on what the churches say, that that's the direction we want to go in, that we have that empowered. We don't need to ask for, we're already asking for a blessing, and we don't need that blessing. We could just go ahead and do it, and there are some that may end up doing it. And so that's really, I guess, where I am at. And so we're just asking that we can work together. Other churches in Canada have left. They want nothing to do with the RCA. We want to be in communion with you on a number of levels. Thank you.
Thank you. Microphone number 3.
Thank you, Madam President. Philip DeCoster from the Commission on Church Order. First, I think it's important if we could have the response from the advisory committee back on the screen. I want to point out to the body something that, can we go to the next slide? The at the same time comes from the slide before. The advisory committee specifically does what the delegate was asking, which is to encourage the Regional Synod of Canada, it's a long day, to begin exploring this. In the overture, there wasn't sufficient definition to know what exploration had or hadn't happened, and so, at least from my understanding, the blessing to continue the conversation is there in the overture. However, I think it's important to continue the fellowship and conversation so that we don't have a breaking away, whether a mutually agreed upon one or otherwise. And just to give the body an idea, this is not fully fleshed out. This would take significant time. But as I was thinking about this, I can conceptualize, and we're not there yet, and we won't be there next year. Please don't ask the Commission on Church Order to do this by next year. But I can conceptualize a section about middle assemblies that says, here's a section for middle assemblies in the U.S., and here's a section for middle assemblies outside the U.S., and perhaps that even needs to be expanded more granularly as churches from other countries continue to get added to our fellowship to adapt our polity to their needs. I think it's possible. but it just needs the time. And so I believe that's what this recommendation does, is allow all of those conversations to continue to develop and grow while still giving the blessing that the Regional Synod of Canada asks for.
Thank you. Microphone number 1.
Thank you, Madam President. George Decker from the Regional Synod of Canada. Before I speak to the motion, I just want to give a really big shout out to the She Is Called movement. Contrary to the microphone 4 in that end where it's really hot, it's cold here, and I'm thankful for these long sleeve t-shirts.
Amen.
Speaking towards the motion, first of all, thank you to the advisory committee for presenting the recommendations that we are currently discussing. We at the Regional Synod of Canada have struggled for a long time as to how Canadian churches would respond to the restructuring proposals. Transitional time can be hard. Many decisions are made, and many consequences are a result of those decisions. Some are favorable, some are not so favorable. And there has been considerable dialogue, both within the Regional Synod of Canada and also with the Canadian churches as to what future the Canadian churches and the church assemblies would look like in response to the restructuring recommendations recently approved at this assembly. As a result of these discussions, we, the Regional Synod of Canada, presented the original overture asking Synod to empower the Synod, the Regional Synod, to set up a new Canadian denomination that would have ties to the RCA. That overture in itself presents a whole slew of unanswered questions. I welcome the changes the advisory committee has presented, and I wholly support the recommendations as put forth by this committee for the following reasons. Although we Canadian churches and assemblies currently belong to the RCA, we all need to be cognizant of the nuances of a cross-border relationship.
Thank you very much. Microphone number 4.
Mike Lamson, Delegate Great Lakes City Classis. I also served on the advisory to Overtures, as you know. I think we tried, it sounds like some of you need to talk to each other, because I feel like there's miscommunication or something, or misinterpretation of what we're trying to do. But speaking for myself, the spirit of our committee was trying to be as generous as we possibly can within the conditions that were given to us. I'm hoping that's what is communicated, which it sounds like I'm hearing from most of you. And also recognizing that I'm speaking personally, I won't speak from the committee in this point, because I'm not sure the committee will agree with me, recognizing that maybe we haven't listened to the Canadian voice enough. And hopefully this becomes this period of time where we're saying we're listening and we need to listen better in that regard. And all these changes that are happening, everything that we're going through, we're just saying, here's the door, we're opening it, do we want to step through it? There's a lot of uncertainty on the other side of the door right now, but at this point we're just saying, do we want to step through the door? And at least for me, I want to say to our Canadian brothers and sisters, I definitely want to do that together with you. Thanks.
Microphone number 2.
Heino Blau, Classis Ileana. I don't know exactly where I stand on the advisory committee's results, but in keeping with the comments just mentioned, I want to draw the attention of the General Synod Council as they appoint the task force to look at the RCA planting churches internationally to this overture and this discussion, because as that was being processed earlier in this synod, I thought, I know the RCA already has planted churches internationally. I was part of a RCA church plant in Canada. And so some of the concerns that were in conjunction with that task force, the Canadian churches, RCA churches in Canada and their members, and Brother John and others can really speak to the blessings and perhaps some of the concerns that would relate to as we look at other countries planting churches internationally. Thank you.
Thank you. Microphone number 1.
Yes, I actually came up to say much of what...
Please start with your name.
Doug Smith, Classes of Canadian Prairies. And I'm standing up here largely to say what we just heard from microphone 2. Canada is a separate country. We're talking about restructuring the denomination. We're talking about the exciting work of churches internationally. If we're going to restructure in a way that's healthy, we have to honor country's sovereignty and culture. And I know at times you guys make an effort, but you don't get it. You just don't get that we have similar issues, but our issues are different. The way we approach them are different. And I think the long-term goal, and I would echo what some of my other Canadian friends have said, we're the ones that stayed. Okay, I'm not leaving over that issue. We've come to a good agreement on that. Middle assemblies is a great idea, but as has been mentioned, let's be intentional. When we're talking about middle assemblies from other countries, they have to have autonomy. We've said explicitly we don't want to be patronizing. Well, then give autonomy to each of the national churches, because and even meeting together every 3 years, and it's not going to be about business. Perfect opportunity to come together internationally and share what's happening in our Reformed fellowships. Thank you.
Thank you. Microphone number 1.
George Thacker, Regional Synod of Canada, Part 2. Okay. There are many nuances between this cross-border relationship. Some of them are behind the scenes between legal implications, financial implications, tax implications with the revenue or Canadian Revenue Agency and the IRA, et cetera. But I also like to point out that, and our other brothers have mentioned this, that the RCA is growing internationally. And perhaps we can use this time of dialogue between the RCA and the Canadian churches to develop a platform that can be expanded and used to support further development in other nations across the globe. Thank you.
Thank you. Seeing no one else approaching the mic, it is now time to vote on ONB 24-6, which is before us. Voting will start in 3, 2, 1. And voting has now ended. And the recommendation passes. Thank you very much. Janelle?
Madam President, on behalf of the Advisory Committee for Overtures and New Business, we thank you, and this concludes our advice for the body.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Okay. I've got to find my place. It's time for votes, right? I think it's time to call Liz Brand up for announcements. As she's coming, I want to say 2 things. Thank you for the good discussion. Thank you for the good involvement. Thank you for the respect heard and sensed on the floor. Thank you to the RCA chaplains for this cross that has accompanied me along the way. Thank you for this little prayer square that someone has given me. This synod has gone the way it has because of the prayer of all of us that has gone into this time together. Thank you. Liz.
Thank you, Madam President. I know you all only cheer because it means you get to go eat next, but it still makes me feel good. So. There are about 25 of you who are booked on American Airlines Flight 584 departing at 3:39 p.m. from Tucson to Grand Rapids tomorrow. If this is you, you'll need a new confirmation number to pull up your reservation, and that's up on the screen. Please use ARBPMW instead of the original confirmation number you received from Travel Advantage when you go to check in for your flight. If you use your original confirmation number, it will tell you that you don't have a reservation and you will be very worried. So please use the new one. If you have any questions about that, you can see Andrea and Jordan at the info desk. In my announcements at the conclusion of tonight's meeting, I'll give further information about what to do with your luggage tomorrow morning if you're taking a synod-provided shuttle to the airport immediately following closing worship. I'll also have lots of other important information regarding checkout and other departure procedures. So please both stay tuned and try not to fall asleep because you're going to have to hear a lot from me tonight. Tonight over dinner, Western Theological Seminary, New Brunswick Theological Seminary, and the Ministerial Formation Certification Agency will be hosting meals. These are dinners that you pre-registered for in your General Synod registration. So if you registered for one of these, it's listed on your name tag. The Western Seminary dinner will take place in the Finger Rock rooms. So if you're attending the Western Seminary dinner, you'll go to the other side of the lobby by the Weston's check-in desk, and you will take the stairs or the elevator to go down to the terrace or lower level where you will find the Finger Rock rooms. The MFCA dinner will be located in the Lantana room, and the NBTS dinner will be located in the Indigo room. Both of those rooms are on the terrace level on this side of the building, so you'll take the stairs or the elevator near the General Synod information desk down to the terrace level to your rooms. There are still a number of Missional Impact Partner plates and plaques that haven't been picked up yet, so if you are a representative of an MIP congregation, please go to the staff tables and see Laryl or Natalie before you head to dinner so you can pick that up. Now we're breaking a little bit early. It's only 4:47 according to my iPad. And since we had coffee a little late today, our banquet staff is really scrambling to get things set up. Dinner starts at 5:15, so if you could just give them a little space when we break to give them time to set up and then start being seated around 5:15, that would be great to just give them that space they need to set up. So thank you very much, Madam President. That concludes my announcements.
Thank you, Liz. We will reconvene tonight at 7 p.m. and we will dismiss at this time following prayer by Olga Schaefer. Olga?
Let's pray. From the rising of the sun to the place where it sets, may the name of the Lord be praised. God, we do give you all thanks and honor and praise for all that you have been doing throughout the work and life of the RCA and throughout this meeting time. God, we also pray for the VP candidates. We ask that you would give this body discernment as to who should serve in that role in this coming year. God, we also ask that you would help us to use finances wisely. We ask that you would lower the anxiety within classes that are struggling to discern their place in the RCA. We also thank you for listening ears and for good discussion. Help us continue to have those conversations and to build those relationships with one another. God, we also thank you for the food that you've provided for us, and we ask that you would bless our discussions and help us to continue to build relationships with one another. We pray this all in Jesus' name. Amen.
Amen. Enjoy your dinner.